So welcome everybody to the LA Blender Users Group. This group's been going since roughly 2011. We have it timed, so we have a meeting around every major Blender release. Blender 4.4 was just released this month, and so we're excited to kind of jump into some of the details of that. Our agenda looks a little bit like this. My name's Stirling Goetz. I'm one of 4 co-leads that kind of runs this meeting. I usually start with a quick what's new with Blender, just to provide some context, because it's been almost 5 months since our last meeting. There's been a lot that's changed. We are blessed to have Francesco from the Blender Foundation here for our meeting as a surprise guest. So he's going to be providing an update from the Blender Foundation. We have Hugo Contreras. Hugo, you in the room? There you are. Okay, awesome. Of course, Hugo. So he'll be doing a short talk on combining normal maps for Blender use. We usually stop in the middle of our meetings to have a quick break. I strongly encourage you to meet the person to your left, meet the person to your right. You'd be amazed at what kind of talent we end up in the room here. Everybody from, small hobbyists up to studio leads and visual effects leads. So find out what everybody's specialization is, find the person that has yours, and enjoy the conversation. After the break, we'll have Rob Crosby presenting on using some AI-based tools for mesh creation in Blender, and also using Blender for AI training. And then we're lucky enough to have Keavon Chambers coming in remote. He's based in Northern California. I met Keavon at the LA.Blend conference. His team produces an open source package called Graphite, and he's going to be showing how to use that and how it compares to what Blender does and how to use it as another tool, open source tool in the toolbox. And then my favorite part of the session, which is show and tell from you. So we love hearing about your Blender projects. If you have any project, whether it's work in progress or something you've done and used Blender in the production of it, we'd love to see it. So come up, talk to me during the break. Yeah, I'm happy to copy, image files, video files, .blend files locally. We could open them up here, and you could show off your work. I'd love to see it. So, is there anybody in the room that has not used Blender before? Don't be shy.
I'll go and throw it out.
Awesome. Okay. Well, there's always at least one in a group this large. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but this is what Blender does. It looks a little bit like, I'm not even running Blender. Here we go. Let's fire it up. You can see it. Everybody can see it. So this is 4.4 with this fantastic new splash screen, which, by the way, I was looking for the demo files for the splash screen. What's going on with that? They're copyright. I kind of figured. I always like to have the splash screen blend file open when we start this, but that's
success.
Yeah. Okay. I kind of figured. Okay, so this is Blender. It does an amazing amount of stuff. The great thing about Blender is not the package or even the price, but it's really the community behind it. And so this group and others like it all around the world are really what makes Blender special. And of course, the industry backing. I had to update these logos today. I grabbed them off the Blender website because there were a few on there that were looking a little dated. So, as I mentioned, Blender 4.4 got released. There's also long-term support. We're at 4.27 and 3.5.21 for those that are counting. These are all the features that came out with Blender 4. I think maybe what we might do is loop back to these features a little bit later on in the talk. We'll kind of run through them. But some of the interesting projects that have been going on since the last time we met includes Flow, which is this cat full-length CG movie that has won Oscars and Golden Globes. And if you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. I recommend checking it out. Flow was made by a bunch of people in Eastern Europe. Let's see, these guys here, Sacre Bleu Productions. And they came and talked about what they did at the LA Blender conference. They did a special screening up in Burbank where the artists and the directors got to talk to the group. Some other interesting stuff that's been going on, Project Dogwalk, which is, if you're a member of the Blender Cloud, you can get a sneak peek into the production of this. This is it's a collaboration between Blender and Godot. So Blender is, the Blender group's finally producing another game, which is fantastic. We haven't had a video game, we haven't had one in a long time, and I'm kind of really excited to see how this turns out. So the #1 open source game engine with the #1 3D content creation package for open source. It should be pretty nifty. Some other stuff that's been going on. There's a whole bunch of nifty things like short films, video games. So, for example, the C-Beams game that's still in development, but launching out on Steam. That looks really fantastic. All the assets made in Blender. Like these panels that you see on the left and the right, these are come from short films like The Lost Tower. There's been some science fiction films that have come out made entirely using Blender, and some of these are just really short, but beautiful and worth knowing. So this one, Hadrian's kind of dark and dystopian, alien, fantastic. Kind of reminds me of the Alien movies, actually. There's some kind of more serious themed, but also fun animations coming out from different studios and individuals. In terms of software assets, GIMP 3 released, which is notable because it's been in production for about 7 years, and everybody's very excited about it. In some ways, I won't go really deep into it, but it has a very non-destructive workflow, which is kind of fun. In some ways, even has the edge on Adobe Photoshop in that regard. Unfortunately, we lost our friend Moto, and since our last meeting, it's been discontinued. So if you know any folks in Moto community, let them know that they're welcome here at the Blender community. And there's always a whole bunch of add-ons and stuff that get released for Blender. I don't mention them always here, but I do like the really strange stuff, like this is Drone Cam. You could basically use your FPV drone controller to fly through the Blender interface. I'm not sure the use case for that, but I just think it's pretty cool that you get stuff like that. Also, there's some really fantastic storyboarding add-ons for Blender that are worth noting, that are getting really good reviews. So in terms of training and events, hey, welcome, come on in. In terms of training and events, happy to report that Autotroph is planning BCon 2026 in Austin. So we're going to get another USA Blender conference. Very excited about that. Austin's just a hop, skip, and a jump away from LA here. They're in the very early planning phases, so they've yet to formally announce, but keep an ear out for that. Obviously, the date's been set for BCon in Amsterdam, and there's some new courses coming out. So, Creative Shrimp currently has a Blender Game Asset course. There's some really nifty AI support for Blender these days. Has anybody played around with Google AI Studio? Okay, well, let's see. Let me see if I could do a quick just show you here. They have this feature called Stream Real Time. So if you share your screen, and then you just pick which application you want to share it with, let's say Blender, you can start to talk to the AI. Hello. Hello, AI. I didn't test this before we started. Hello. Unmuted. It might, well, we're using the microphone actually for Microsoft Teams, so this may not work properly. Now well, I don't want to make the AI sad or anything, but here, okay, let's stop sharing. Okay.
You can type it out, right?
Oh, here we go. There's a use your microphone option. You know what? I'm just not gonna do this now because I don't want to mess with the microphone for Teams. But basically, it knows Blender, it knows the user interface, it knows all the features in Blender, it's read all the documentation. So you could just ask it a question like, how do I make a hole in this cube? And it will voice guide you interactively through the process, like where to go into the menus, how to do all that stuff. So yeah, all of us have our own free Blender mentor, basically. Okay, so with that, quick intro. I usually just throw this up. These are really just, if you're new to Blender, these are some great sites to know. Obviously, the Blender website, Blender Nation's kind of like the LA Times of Blender. Blender communities can be found at blender.community, including Blender Artists, which is a really big one. Blender BuildBot is where you go to get like cutting edge, unreleased versions of Blender. And then there's a bunch of sites here that are kind of fun for if you're just looking for tutorials or instruction or things like that. Oh, okay. I'm going to stop there and see if Francesco wants to just come up and have a chat. I'll do that background.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
You have slides to
Thanks
present,
for
or are you just going to do it?
No, I think I can maybe just use your. I just wrote some notes, so that's why I have my laptop here. But
Okay.
But yeah, so I can put it on the edge. It's totally stable.
So introduce yourself for those that don't.
Yes, of course. Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Francesco. I come from Amsterdam. I work at Blender as COO. In practice, this means I sort of help out the project in various capacities to pursue its project and its mission. I work together with Ton, the founder, and currently like the lead of the project, together with a team of now over 50 people at Blender. A lot of people are based in Amsterdam. A lot of people are also working online and working remote. And we make a bunch of stuff. Some of you might be familiar with some of it, but I'm sure you guys know about Blender. So that is the biggest thing that that we work on and facilitate as a community project. Because Blender is a community project. There is a Blender Foundation that is a non-profit org that has a very clear mission of sustaining and facilitating the public open source project so that it can pursue its mission of giving the best 3D technology in the hands of everyone as free and open source software. That's kind of like the mission of what the foundation, the foundation pursues. And then it does all the activities that are required to make that happen and to make that possible. And one of the activities is to kind of organize and run a business to actually hire people that work in different capacities, from development to project management to product management, to community coordination, to really get as much resources as possible into the project so that Blender is the best tool that it can be. So I just want to kind of reiterate on this because sometimes it's a little bit confusing for people because people know Blender as a software, they know it maybe a little bit as a brand, but then like, what is it behind and how does it work? It's sometimes a little bit opaque. So I take any opportunity that I have to kind of rebroadcast and reiterate the message so you hear it first. From, it's not like the telephone, the game that like one person repeats the other thing and then it's like, yeah, and then they make money by, selling organs and then they make like, that's, you never know, right? Yeah. So I want to take like, I don't know how much time I have, like 5 minutes or so, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, take up the
Yeah. Okay, sure. I mean, I think what is fun to do, maybe, I'm going to say a few things, like share a few things, and then I think it's also fun to do maybe a bit of Q&A if people have questions. Like I'm happy to answer. I think that can also lead to interesting discussion because this is obviously not very prepared. This is my last day here in LA. I want to thank Bella for actually letting me know that there was a meetup. So then I was like, of course I have to go. So I've been here once already. So to another meetup. Also, just almost at random, and of course, it's super good to be back and to be able to reconnect with everybody because I don't come here very often. So in terms of like a little update, first about like what I've been doing here. So I'm here for the past 2 weeks. We were at GDC with Blender, kind of officially to do a lot of business meetings, connecting with the industry. Those are like, it's an activity that we do now for 3 years. Historically, Blender has been coming to the US for SIGGRAPH. Since like the early 2000s. So that's like something that is very well established. We try to be there in the exhibit and to connect with users and with the industry and to build relationships. And like that takes many, many years to get to the point where then you even get support from the industry. And so like it's very important to be around. You cannot just be a very popular online project. You also have to go into the real world. So we try to do that as well. And eventually with the growing adoption of Blender, especially in the game industry, then it was kind of natural to go to one of the biggest game-related events that happen. So in San Francisco, there is this Game Developers Conference. And we never really exhibited there because obviously the overhead that comes with having like a booth and being present and being visible at that level is a little bit too much for the organization, right? We have to manage our budget. But at least being there and say, hey, we're in town, everybody is there and do meetings. The meetings are usually, it's one part of the job that I do is kind of business development, if you can call it that, or industry relations. So it's literally meeting with development fund sponsors or prospective development fund sponsors to understand what do we do with Blender, explain them how we work and so on. Because what Blender does in terms of relations, Blender is not a vendor. So it's not that, you go to a very big game studio or a game company and you say, so if you buy 100 licenses, we give you 20% discount. That would be easy, but we don't do that because Blender now has gotten good enough that people actually, but they already have it. So what do we sell them, right? And so it's more about, really making sure that there is a good understanding of the mission and like, of course, donations that usually come with a little bit of self-interest from corporations. So like to really make sure that that self-interest is aligned with the Blender roadmap and the vision so that then, it makes for a good relation. And so that's what I spend a lot of my time when I'm here doing. When you think business meeting, that's what it is. And of course, we do that because Blender cannot exist without the support of the people and also companies. So we try also to diversify a little bit how we get our funding. So I think that's enough talk about money, but that's also one of the main reasons why we attend those events. We did a spontaneous, semi-spontaneous Blender meetup in San Francisco. It was really fun because the time before we actually organized something in a bar. We booked it, we got like coffee for everybody, and then it was just like too far from the venue. So like we had like 50 people coming. And then like 20 people came. So it was like very sad and depressing. So this year I told Dalai, I was together with Dalai, who is a product manager at Blender. I was like, let's do it in the garden in front of the convention center. We take a big flag with the Blender logo on it and wave it around and tell people, okay, let's meet here at 10 a.m. and just, bring your own coffee, whatever. And like 100 people came. So it was much better, much more efficient to do. It's a bit awkward because you're standing in a grass field and you cannot really, this is a very nice setup. But that was, at least nice because many, many more people could come and connect. So we do that. These are the kind of things that we do when we are traveling. Then I thought let's add one more week to the schedule of the trip to be in LA and have it much more spontaneous and see what happens. So like this happened, for example, that's very spontaneous. And next to that, a bunch of other meetings with studios. Obviously, there is a lot of like when business is in development, there isn't a lot to talk about publicly. But you can imagine that, here in this area, there are quite a few major studios that use Blender, and they are trying to understand how to get involved with it. Because to me, that's what it's all about. It's not just about having, people to donate or collect money or whatever. It's really this mantra of the get involved is not just giving, money. It's really, there is expertise, there is know-how, there is like so many things that can help the project to get better. And having organization to embrace it a little bit more, that's what then makes the project more sustainable and strong. Because otherwise you put all the resources on this little team somewhere, on the other side of the world that is trying to do their best and coordinate resources. You can own parts of, the project and the roadmap if you participate. And that is a big investment. It costs a lot of energy, but it is, it yields great results. And so like, again, it's all about bringing that kind of philosophy and that kind of idea to the people, which is pretty novel because that's normally not how production software is done. So I have like 3 further updates categorized in Blender Foundation updates, Blender projects, and then Blender Studio projects. I mean, although Stirling already stole half of the content from what I was going to say. It's good, of course, it's great. So it's going to be relatively short. So last year, we did a user survey. I don't know if you guys know, it was like online just for a couple of weeks, very short. But it was the very first time that we did a user survey online, asking for feedback on various topics and trying to collect some data to understand the demographics, but especially the use of Blender and especially what people are interested in Blender. And also, again, trying to figure out a little bit how people spend their money in Blender or in the Blender ecosystem to try to help us get a picture. In the next 1-2 weeks, that survey will be finally published. So I'm sorry that it was not out yet. And I'm very excited because like some of the numbers are very, very interesting. They really show like how much the professional adoption of the project goes, for example. We have been doing an annual report with the foundation for the past 3 years. So, you know, in the name of transparency and public accountability of what the project does, and again, like how do we invest and spend the resources, like the donations that we get, we do very detailed reporting of all the activities and like a lot of the expenditure that we do, so that people can see where, where they're, what are they helping, basically. So that one is like planned to happen in the next few months, so that we just, keep doing that. We're going to be in a couple of events this year in Annecy, France. It's like a very big kind of European animation festival and animation industry event. We've been doing that for a few years. Then there is going to be SIGGRAPH in Vancouver. After SIGGRAPH, I think I'm coming back here for another week. So maybe we can do it would be fun to maybe do an event and a meetup organized less than 1 day before I leave. So maybe it's something, so I think would be something fun to do. And then Stirling said we have Blender conference in Amsterdam, and this year is earlier than usual. It's in September, and it's 1 week after IBC, which is the International Broadcasting Conference, which is like a huge event that brings in hundreds of thousands of people from all over the world. It's kind of like NAB that happens next week in Vegas, but in Europe. And so like try to align that, get a little bit better weather. I don't know has anyone ever been to a Blender conference in Amsterdam here? One. Okay, great. So those are kind of the events. Then in terms of projects, things that I want to highlight. So yesterday we released the Blender Heads episode 8. That's like it's a episode about Sergey. So Sergey is the head of development at Blender. He's been involved since like 2012, like me. He joined to work on the Tears of Steel project with Ian Hubert. Probably you guys know who Ian Hubert is. So we've been producing this documentary series for now almost 2 years. We decided to hire an in-house documentary filmmaker to be at the Blender HQ and just film stuff, like the stuff that happens, because it's so interesting. Like, and it's kind of this journey that we are going through with, like, the project is growing, everybody has their own life story happening, and it's a bunch of very interesting people. And so like we found this filmmaker, Maike Cleverland, and she's really, I really like her filmmaking style, and she does usually 1-2 people per episode with a little arc and trying to connect the bigger picture, the dots of the bigger picture of what is happening with Blender and where Blender is going. It's almost like a little Netflix series, episode of 20-30 minutes. I encourage you to check it out if you want to give a face to the Blender project. And this episode in particular is really fun. And in terms of Blender itself, so Stirling was mentioning some websites. There is one in particular that I think it's interesting for everyone to know. It's projects.blender.org. That's where like the development itself happens and is coordinated. So it's kind of the public it's both the bug tracker, but also like the project management website. So you can actually see what is being worked on, because you're like, okay, what are they going to do next? I mean, it's not a secret. You can go and find out really today what is happening. And also, why is this not happening? You can go there and find out why it is not happening. Why did this get stuck? You can find the task and see why. Maybe you can even help to get it unstuck. So projects.blender.org, that's the place. And, we are currently dividing our activities in two categories. One is what you would call the module maintenance. So basically keeping the ongoing parts of Blender developed and maintained and bug fixed and bug free, and then spend resources on specific topics, which we call projects, to actually deliver new features and new functionality. There are obviously limits to how much we can do. So there are a handful of them. One of them is the story tools. So like working on tools to improve storyboarding and story pre-visualizations, working with a video sequence editor, improve some functionality there to have it better handle the way Blender scenes work. There is a lot of add-ons that do this kind of stuff. And that's actually in the film industry, one of the things that Blender is the most popular with, because you don't have any requirements. A story artist can just take Blender and scribble around and do stuff without any constraints. So it's used a lot in studios, also pretty big ones. But there is a very heavy reliance on add-ons and extensions, add-ons to make this possible. And we believe that some of these functionality should really be core in Blender, because then you are going to be able to overcome some of the limitations that these add-ons cannot overcome, because they have to deal with like core limitations of the software. So we are making a project to deal with that. And then next to that, there is online assets. So for the longest time, Blender has an asset library. People have even built kind of online ways to handle assets, most famously the Polyhaven add-on that you can download, and it downloads everything and makes like a local library. I think that having high quality online asset libraries is going to help Blender users a lot. So that's kind of what we are pushing to do. Obviously, it's fairly involved to do well. And then more things like Blender projects. So basically having specific project-specific settings that help you to work with others and to have like multiple blend files responding to variables that you set in one project, so that paths are the same everywhere, settings are the same everywhere, things like that. Continuous work on the animation tools. The list goes on. And then finally, about the Blender Studio, I wanted to say a couple of things. So there is still the website studio.blender.org. That's a place where the creative part of the team that is working in the Amsterdam HQ lives and operates, where we make open projects. And indeed, for the second time in the history of the kind of Blender organization, we are doing an interactive / game project, working together with Godot as an engine. The project is very short. Like this year, we want to do shorter projects. After the release of Gold, which took a very long time to do, we decided, okay, let's try to go back to having faster iterations. So work like 4 months on something and ship it, which is a challenge, but it's not impossible. It's a different mindset that you need to have. And so this was the goal, is to explore interoperability between Blender and game engines, asset creation for real time, what Blender does well, where Blender can improve, which parts of the pipeline should be improved. Is it about GLTF? Is it about geometry nodes? Is it about Godot? Like which one should improve? So we try to log all this stuff, and then at the end of the project, share it. And so this is like kind of wrapping up. I was trying to, maybe I'm going to hang out here a little bit and try to build a game. I have it. I have the build on my computer. So then later, when we have the break, if I manage to make it run, people can just see it. Of course, it's in development, but if you're curious, you can actually see it. And then we have a couple of other projects coming up this year that are more related to filmmaking and pushing some of the projects that I mentioned earlier, in particular the story tools. So we want to make another cowboy animation. So I don't know if you've seen it, the 2D animation with that bull that is punching the robot. It was also in the Blender reel. And then another short film directed by Andy, who is the director of Spring, the girl in the woods with like those big creatures. So we are doing something together with Andy that is gonna hopefully rely on the stylized rendering pipeline that we built for Gold. That's kind of the idea, to take it and really make something with it. So a little bit random, but this is kind of the overview of what we are doing this year. And thank you so much for listening. And
take some questions.
Yeah. And so if you guys have any question, I'm happy to answer now. Yes.
It's probably a crazy idea, but after the success of Flow, have you thought of maybe playing to do an animated film with a very simplistic production approach like he used, you can bring him in to direct it.
Yeah, so I think Goetz is pretty booked now for the time being. So I think that the creative desire to make things is really not something that there is a shortage of. And that's something that, you know, I personally, I really want to do it, because I think that having the Blender Studio after so many years of doing productions that remain in the relatively, you know, small scope, I think it would be very, like on a strategic level, very important to actually pursue something bigger and more ambitious. This is something that we are talking about, but this is not, you know, before committing to that kind of work, you need a lot of things to happen. But of course, seeing what happened with Flow, and, you know, I think to myself, okay, you know, this is something that definitely could have been pulled off by the team, and with relatively not so much more resources than we have. And so, and I think that that is definitely something that I would like to see on the roadmap. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I did a talk last year at the Blender conference about the Blender roadmap. And that was one of the topics to me that is like we kind of lumped it into the future of like modeling tools, for example, like next gen modeling tools, together with SDF and NURBS and like all that kind of stuff. It also kind of fits more like the computer vision segment of, you know, R&D that Blender could do. And I think that in the past couple of years, we've been approached by researchers and people doing, you know, building libraries and tools that I would love to see in Blender. It would be great. And then it just doesn't happen because of resource limitations. But that kind of technology, it's something that is very interesting. And I think it's like, you know, it's definitely one of those kind of future technologies that can help to unlock different creative workflows. And in principle, that's what Blender should really provide to people. And when these things don't happen, usually is because we don't have the expertise or the resources that are willing to bridge the gap between the technology and the tool. So there is definitely a high interest in getting that kind of stuff available in Blender, just unfortunately not enough, you know, support to make it happen. But yeah, there was one question in the back, yeah.
A few weeks ago, I saw something, people that work on the Goo engine going to, I guess, work closer with Blender on NPR type. What can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I know Dylan Goo since before he was famous. So, I mean, jokes aside, like he was doing there was cat animations, those cat kung fu animations, and you know, I invited him to a Blender conference, like must have been like maybe 7 years ago, 8 years ago, or something like that. And he was by himself doing these little things, trying to do like some plushies and trying to figure things out. And we've been keeping in touch regularly, and I try to invite him every year to the conference in Amsterdam when we are here. We try to see each other. And it's been so amazing to see the journey he's been through and what he's been able to build, because he basically built an animation studio. He works with some really talented people. He started investing in technology development by himself, for himself, using Blender, which is always very exciting. And also being relatively public about it. Say, we make a build, we make our own technical solutions because we want to achieve this specific look. And I was like, that's awesome. You know what would be even more awesome? If that stuff somehow finds its way to Blender, because at the beginning is very cool and fun to build your own tech. Then the less fun part comes when you have to maintain it for 2 years or 5 or 10 years. Then you're like, you know, and this is actually an interesting trend that is happening with Blender itself, of course, right? Like we try to add and develop and do awesome things, but then as you get a bigger and bigger user base and a higher and higher reliance on the tool, you also really need to make sure that things keep working. And you want to make a new release with awesome features, but you cannot break compatibility. So some things you cannot do. You try to improve some UI workflow, and then people come with pitchforks and like, you know, to be like, don't change my workflow. You broke my workflow. You broke my API. It's very important to keep that stability, and it's really a big effort. And even if you're like a little in-house studio and a small team doing that, this kind of stuff happens to you too. And so after some conversations, basically, you know, I was kind of pitching him the idea, now that you have a better idea of what you want to achieve, let's try to make it happen as part of the NPR project that we want to have in Blender. So for the longest time, Blender has been trying and has been offering NPR workflows with like the line art tools and like, you know, speaking with different developers, trying to contribute features. But it has always been tricky to do because you really need to fit this kind of rendering tech on top or alongside the current viewport tech and the current compositing tech. And it's quite specialized, and you need to, you know, very often this technology comes from people that are not maybe engineers themselves. So they develop things that maybe look cool and they work, but they don't really fit the design and the architecture of the software. So you really need to put some effort into making that happen. And so that's what then we thought, okay, now Dylan has some really talented people in his team that also are reaching, like they have that level of engineering skills, so they can work together with Blender developers on actually bringing some of that vision into the upstream software itself. And so the idea is that, you know, late as usual and and some other developers in the Dylan in the Goo Studio team, together with Clement and together with Miguel, so developers that are kind of working for Blender, they work together to develop a prototype, iterate on it, and then try to turn that into actual NPR technology that is available straight into Blender. So that's kind of the picture and where it comes from and where it's going. And it's really difficult, but I think everybody's very committed to make it happen. So I hope in the next months there will be updates on that. Yeah. So yes. Couple more questions, or
Yeah.
there is. Well, wait. You are, yeah.
Yeah, so this.
So primarily we put it on blender.org and then on all the Blender websites, and that's how most people got it. We did it on social media, some Discord, some whatever, like try to have it spread organically. But it was really like an experiment, so it was kind of intentional to not really broadcast it super wide. Even like the duration of the survey itself, you know, like the Stack Overflow user survey, that's kind of one of the inspirations for how this is done. They keep it running for a month. Like I think that a month, maybe too much, but at the same time, you know, maybe enough for everyone to really take notice. But yeah, so it was like mostly on the official Blender channels. And I think when we do it next year, because then every year that we will do it, the survey will become more and more valuable, right? Because then you can collect temporal data as well, and you can see trends. So then we will really make sure that we reach out to as many communities as possible to make it visible. Yeah, yeah.
Development side, knowing the limitations of size of the team and such.
Yeah.
I have found in Cursor invaluable in developing, you know, different things. I'm just wondering if y'all are looking at AI based development platforms and starting to explore that and bring it in.
Yeah, so the AI is a huge topic. We could have a 1-hour session just about that. I have lots of thoughts about it, but so, you know, if people are curious about it, very happy to share on that as well. There has been actually on the development side some experiments, like Brecht has done some experiments that you can find on his project.blender.org profile to write like little utilities and tools to do like code refactoring and like bug fixing. You definitely, like on a code base of the size and the complexity of Blender, you really need to know what you're doing and try to get like assistance to do stuff. And you like the time that it would take you to get that to work and the time that it would take to do it yourself, it's almost more like you could probably do it yourself. But it's interesting to explore because then, like you say, sometimes I do that myself. I don't consider myself a developer or anything, but like after many years of developing software, some things I know how to do it in a way that I know it's pretty standard, right? There are standard patterns, standard ways of doing things, like for test-driven development, like this is how you make, you know, a class in Python. Like there are some basic things that I feel relatively comfortable doing myself. And then just for fun or just for out of pure interest, I'm like, okay, how if I would prompt an LLM to do this for me, how would that work? And sometimes the results are really surprising, like surprisingly accurate and surprisingly good. Sometimes you just, you know, you're like, okay, I see what you're trying to do here, buddy, but that's not what we want. And if I can add one thing to this, it's kind of a thought that I had in the past few days, because you can imagine that every meeting that I had with every studio or every, film executive in the world, they're like, but what about AI? Or like, what does Blender do with AI? That question comes up now every day. Like at GDC with the games, like then I went to GTC, the GPU Technology Conference, which is an event sponsored by NVIDIA that happens alongside GDC. It was basically an AI conference. So like everything is AI. And I was there feeling like, okay, we don't belong here almost, it's just like, it feels very interesting to see how much all these huge organization, they pivot so quickly and they go like, okay, this is us and AI, this is what we do. And AI becomes like, the NFT or the omniverse, the metaverse of the thing of the year, which is fine. It's just how economy works nowadays. And you just have to adapt to those trends if you want to please your investors or like, stay up to date. But basically, the other day I was talking about this topic with someone and saying, also at the Blender conference, we said for us, for Blender doesn't make, I don't think Blender is going to make a statement like, for example, Procreate has done, or like Storyboard Pro has done recently, saying fuck AI. Like I don't think we are going to do that specifically because it's not so simple. There is technology in Blender that already uses AI, like denoising, and it uses it for many years. Nobody ever said anything about that. And there are some technologies, like for us, it's about giving artists control. So that's what, we build tools that keep artists in control. So like if you consider AI a tool that is like built in an ethical way, because ultimately that's the biggest problem with, LLMs and, generative AI in general, the training of models using sources that are not legal. As long as the artist is in control, you can do a lot of interesting things. For example, upscaling, retiming, optical flow, masking. Like there are so many things that we could put into Blender that would facilitate the life of an artist. Cleanup, some in-betweening, layering. Yeah, UV mapping, sure. Like some things actually, we've been thinking about that, and even having better algorithms would be better. That's also like a very important thing to think about, because AI is not the solution for everything. So that is like one of those examples, like yes, but maybe also put a little bit more effort in the algorithms, and probably you also get there, and you don't need to cut down 100 trees every time you want to unwrap something. So there is all this stuff that I think Blender could really benefit from, artists could really benefit from, without feeling that you are doing something, you're building upon work that actually you shouldn't be building upon. Like that's something that I'm very, very sensitive for. But what I actually wanted to say was, nowadays, if you have a tool like Cursor, or if you see some of the Gen AI tools, it feels like you basically have an assistant, and you tell the assistant what to do. And as an artist, it's basically, so, if you're a producer, you have the artist and you tell him, can you put the toilet here? Okay, like move it a little bit more to the left, move it a little bit left to the right, like just make it blue, make it pink. And it does it to the best of its abilities. When you're an artist and you're doing that, and you try to tell the assistant to do it, at some point you're gonna be like, you know what, just let me do it. I don't know if you ever found yourself in that situation, but it's like that, right? So a lot of use cases that you see also online of this Cursor thing, that you type a prompt and it starts building things for you. It's super impressive, but if you really want to have control, that's like, those are not, the text-based interface is still like very primitive. So even for those things, I think that what Blender will do in the future is look into how you can really get a handle for those generative models, to really be able to control it physically with gizmos without talking, I was like, maybe, with Neuralink is gonna get faster, but like, I don't know if that's what I would like to do with Blender. I just like to move the things around myself. And final thought, then that I stop talking. In addition to these models, to me, there is also another way to deal with this, which is parametric design. I also talked about this at the Blender conference in this roadmap presentation, that Blender is investing a lot in the geometry nodes system, and in general, parametric procedural design tools, where some artists can build very configurable workflows that then enable artists to be very productive. So I want to make a cup or a vase or whatever. I'm not going to prompt a model or ask the AI to make me a vase. I'm going to have a vase generator with like a few control points, and I can get my vase myself. And it's right there. And I can have variants, and I can have like different things, and I can have different handles to give it the shape that I want. And in some cases, this might be much more efficient than, just trying to talk to an assistant to, and iterate over it to get it done. And I think that a lot of creative problems, they can be solved this way by having like configurable, more procedural and parametric tools, good asset libraries, and combining things together. So like that, I think for me is also a very, very interesting and very currently underrated area because everybody's looking at models. So that is kind of the unrequested rant about AI. And now you know. We have time, one more question, maybe if people have, otherwise I move on and leave the stage to someone else. We good? Okay, one last.
SDF modeling that can be integrated.
Yeah, I did mention it, like indeed as a part of the kind of next gen modeling workflows. There are super cool libraries. We try to talk to developers that might be interested in adding that tech, but again, resources. So I wish it was there already.
Yeah.
There are add-ons for it, so you can already enjoy that technology. And the only reason why it's not in Blender is because we don't have. Now is my time for the question. So who is the first time here? Oh, it's like majority of people. Okay, very cool. Who is donating to Blender? Did anyone ever donate to Blender once? Okay, good. It's fine. No shaming, just a little bit of shame. That's what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks. So, if you can, support the project because it helps us to get the SDF. It helps us to get better tools. It helps us. It really does make a difference. And if you can donate, there are many other ways to get involved, like report bugs, test the features, give feedback to developers. Like not just like I want this and then go away. You have to get involved. It's like I think it's easier if you give money because it's less time and effort. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. And then of course I'm around, so feel free to reach out. I brought some stickers, so if people want stickers, just get them there. Only $5.
Only like a platinum donation to Blender Foundation, right? Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Francesco. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Steve, for pointing out that we have not been sharing screens. So I'll fix that in post when I post up the recording. So it looks like we were doing that the whole time. Okay, so we've been going for about an hour. What do you guys think? Maybe a quick break and break and socialize, and then we'll just kick things off in about 15 minutes. Does that sound good? Okay, so it's currently 3:27, so approximately 3:37 we'll get kicked off here. Again, bathrooms are just out this way. There's also a water fountain. Meet your neighbors, find out what they do, and find out what their interest in Blender is. All right, thanks. We've got a couple other presentations here. Just because we normally have somebody that kind of walks us through like Blender 4.4 new features. Unfortunately, he's out sick today, so we're going to do our best just to kind of walk you through the really amazing what's new page that they put up for each version of Blender now. So real quickly, who has had a chance to go through this page and see what's new with Blender 4.4? Couple of us. Okay, all right. So this might be new for some folks. This is Blender 4.4 is really considered like a very quality release. They spent a lot of time fixing a lot of bugs, over 700 to get it to the code quality for release. So really fantastic that they're wiping out the technical debt for the product. You can kind of see all the different issues that they fixed. Got a few here actually in EV and the viewport, which is great. There's a new style of animating. And by the way, there are some really fantastic overview videos that go with this, including one that's on the top of this page, but it's about 28 minutes, so we're not going to watch that together because we don't have the time. But animation has been improved, so there's this idea of action slots. So if you're animating multiple objects in a scene at the same time, it's a lot more intuitive. In terms of the VSE, there's some great new text editing features built into the VSE. I kind of jump back and forth between using Blender's VSE quite a bit for just, doing previews and things like that. And so I'm always a big fan of whenever we improve the video sequence editor. There's support for new codecs. So if you're one of the lucky, 10 to 12 people that manage to score yourself an RTX 5090 GPU, you can now render straight out hardware accelerated out of Blender using H.265 or some of the newer codecs, as well as kind of a richer color space with support for 10-bit and 12-bit color space, which is really nice. So the extensions platform keeps on growing. So in case you are unaware, Blender is extended by a massive list of add-ons. These are all kind of being cataloged in the cloud. And so, it's turned off by default, but you can go into Blender and just make Blender do just about anything through add-ons. And that list just keeps on growing. There's some great tools for doing modeling and in particular, finding poles within your mesh topology and then fixing those poles, which is always handy. There's better influencing when you're converting from triangles to quads in your meshes. Some neat new tricks for doing edge dissolve. And there's a new Blender benchmark, which is great. If you haven't used the Blender benchmark, it's really fun. It's just a standalone app. It downloads a couple of test files, test.blend files, and then runs them either on your CPU or your GPU, and then gives you the option to upload those up into opendata.blender.com. So where you can actually go see kind of where you score on the Blender benchmark. So, you can see, am I in the top 7% of users in terms of performance? Or you can kind of see, is it really worth shelling out the $4,000 that scalpers are charging for NVIDIA cards? Great stuff. So there's some new brush tools. I know it's an interesting demo, right? They're taking this fantastic human anatomy and then just kind of blockifying it. But it does demonstrate the brush really well. So there's some new brush types for doing sculpting. Lots of new sculpting features. Lots of support for doing questionable color themes for your Blender. Really, really bright and garish, but UBU. Some better kind of UI snapping. In fact, there's a huge number of UI improvements which are really appreciated that make Blender just overall way more usable, including all of these here. So there's some nice operating system specific support. If you're on a Mac, being able to kind of preview things. This is stuff from the UI team. And then, speed improvements. So in the compositor alone, these are kind of improvements that you'll see from just code refactoring. The glare node has actually gotten a huge upgrade. So everybody loves the glare node. One of those things that you'd like to stick on your render post pro. And it's also well aligned to the VFX reference platform. So if you're managing giant pipelines, Blender's now up to speed with the VFX reference platform for 2025. So that means, Python versions and things like this are all synchronized to what everybody else in the industry is using. And lots of other stuff. So Francesco mentioned, GLTF for doing import export and geometry nodes improvements and, Python and cycles, which add a lot more open shading language support added, more complete open shading support added, USD for kind of interop, and so on and so forth. Vulkan is almost there. It looks like there's been a lot of improvements in 4.4 to make Vulkan the default rendering engine, swapping out OpenGL. It sounds like most likely the next version of Blender will be the one where they throw the switch and make Vulkan default, but that's my speculation from what I'm reading online. We could always ask Francesco. So anyways, yeah, that's Blender 4.4. So we have, so we might just change up the agenda a little bit based on, we're having some kind of interesting issues with some people joining the Teams meeting to be able to present. So I'm just going to ask, Keavon, are you on the line? I mentioned earlier is building this open source graphics tool called Graphite. And yeah, I've just asked him to come in and, oh, there you are. Hey, Keavon.
Here we are. Hi.
So you should be able to see the group. I have kind of an iPad sitting in a corner pointed at the group. There's roughly about 30 people here, plus some online folks. And yeah, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then take it away. You have about, let's say 15 to 30 minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
Hi, everybody. I guess as a quick introduction, since that's a good idea, I've been pretty much a Blender user for the past like 15 years or so, since 2.49. Someone might want to fact check me on the dates there, but before Sintel came out. And basically kind of grew up being a creative generalist, as I guess most of us seem to be in this community, which is awesome. But I've always been sort of a product designer, as I didn't even know what that meant at the time, but I've sort of evolved more towards working on product things, which it ultimately means sort of teaching myself programming and design and everything, and finding myself very dissatisfied with the lack of a really good, basically alternative to the Adobe products. And then that kind of evolved with something that was in my mind for many years while still using Blender and also doing some game development like in Unity, and of course also using Photoshop and teaching myself Illustrator and actually Flash back in the day. That was fun. It was unfortunately kind of short-lived, but maybe we can in the future even revive some of the really fun parts of what they did there, because actually Flash had some really cool ideas. But anyways, so we've been working on this project for 4 years. The reason it's called Graphite is because it is based upon a node graph, which I think many of you will be pretty excited if you've been using geometry nodes, or even before then, of course, shader nodes. That has been a huge part of the workflow. And also elsewhere in the 3D industry, we have Substance Designer has kind of taken the industry by storm and sort of ushered in PBR as a concept, and also procedural textures as an alternative to photogrammetry or to photo scanning. But yeah, so the overall idea, I'm just going to, I guess before I jump into some demos and also showing specifically how Blender has inspired the design of this, I'm going to kind of just give a couple little overviews of pointing out some things on the website, because that's nice and easy to show. But our goal really is, starting out, just for context, the goal is to really focus on everything from graphic design to painting to image editing, like photo processing, and also motion graphics. So this is the very long-term roadmap. This will be over several decades. And then desktop publishing, so like page layout, and also even VFX compositing. So kind of like in the territory of Nuke, or not really focused as much on like actual Hollywood film kind of usage, but more towards like more of the motion graphic style of compositing. So what you might do in After Effects. And so far we started out just focusing on the one thing, which is graphic design with vector editing, because it's a lot easier to work on starting out with geometry and simple shapes than it is to make sure we have a very robust GPU-centric pipeline that can make fast image editing and photo editing. And of course, those require a lot of research into the algorithms. So we're now moving into that this year. That's the territory we are focusing on building the tech for. But at the moment, you can consider us basically a vector editor with procedural features, and also with a bunch of very nice inspiration from some of the nicest parts that Blender has focused on with its user experience. So one very simple thing is anything you drag, you can always right-click or hit escape and cancel that. And there are so many software programs that do not support that. If you're dragging and hit escape or right-click, there's no way to cancel that. But Blender is pretty consistent about that, and that's something that I found really enjoyable. But I've also, just to show you the node graph here, I was working on this, and I think if I have the time, I might do a demo kind of just showing off how you actually use it and creating one of these little creatures. But the idea is that this actually uses a lot of the procedural features we use a mirror modifier or a mirror node for the legs. We use a number of different nodes that do procedural modifications to these teeth. So you can just move them around like that, and we have more teeth as needed as they appear. We have all of the hair here. That would be quite a pain to place by hand. Yeah, so also I can go and show this other creature as well, kind of similar design, and I might make a third one with you guys in a minute. But I wanted to start out with a little bit of a, just showing off how the node graph actually works. So most of these nodes I did not make by hand. I actually used the tools. So basically, a big concept here is that we want to make procedural editing accessible even to people who don't know some of the more technical aspects of procedural design. So if you're using the node system, we ideally want to make it so the tools will kind of do as much of that as possible for you. I'm just doing a little cleanup. We've been improving the algorithms over the past year that kind of keeps the graph clean and organized, but there are always a few little edge cases that keep them moving when they're not supposed to, so I'll just clean that up. But okay, so basically we've got the eye. This is just a group. As we can see, we actually have a layer panel, and this layer panel is equivalent to these nodes here. And basically a layer can just simply have other layers inside of it, and that makes it a group if it's fed by more layers. So that's kind of one of the concepts here is this is a group called eye, and then we've got these three eyes inside, the three shapes inside. And those are simply just drawn like you would use any ordinary tool if you're using Inkscape or Illustrator, and create two different shapes. And here are the shapes in the layer panel, and then of course here are the shapes in the node graph as well. So a layer really, if it shows up in the layer panel, a layer is just sort of an output for an ellipse and a transform and a fill and a stroke. And I can always just delete. For example, let's go ahead and delete the stroke and change the color of the fill. And now, as we can see in here, and in fact, we don't even have to open the node graph, because the whole goal here, again, is to make it very simple for users who are not having to deal with the complexity of kind of a visual programming language that is the node graph. So here we, again, can just make changes to, if you click on the layer, you just see all the nodes that feed into that layer. So I click on the layer here, and we have an ellipse node, a transform, and a fill. So if we click on it, we have all of those showing up here. So that's the idea, is basically make it nice and easy for users, whether they are coming from more of a design background and don't really have any formal programming or technical art experience, or if they're coming more from a technical background and they really want to stick around in this node graph most of the time, and then maybe occasionally go in and actually have the ability to draw, a shape like this. Of course, that got slowed down because that is rendering. But yeah, drawing like this, or with a regular pen tool. And in a few minutes, I'm also going to show specifically how we've taken a lot of inspiration from the Blender shortcuts to make the pen tool as nice as it can possibly be. I have some major complaints about how Illustrator uses its pen tool, and it's just very not user-friendly. But using some of the shortcuts like G, R, and S, if I select this, and I can actually just move around the points, or I could select multiple of them, and now I can use S to scale them closer together. And I can even lock them along an axis and type the number 2 and have it do everything you're used to in Blender, which is just super fantastic. It makes the actual experience of drawing and modifying this geometry, even though it's in 2D as opposed to working with a mesh in 3D, it makes it so much nicer. And then I also mentioned meshes. We also have sort of just this experimental support for having meshes as opposed to paths. So now this is actually a mesh, even though unlike in Blender where you have straight lines as geometry, we actually have these curves here as geometry. So that's an experimental feature we're working on, making it even more robust, but you can actually do this. And for example, you can make a spider web and actually connect all those points together. So what that might look like would be like if we had, I'm just gonna make 3 of them and then put them together by aligning them. And if I now, one thing I have to do is connect them basically just with these points, like that. And again, this is quite experimental. Okay, I guess that breaks in a few cases if you're trying to make a spider web. I'm going to make something that is more of an artistic interpretation of a spider web, since of course these tools are not meant to work with the vector geometry, the mesh geometry yet. But just kind of giving a little demonstration of what you can do. And notice that we started out with 3 layers, but the tools are actually even going and making like merges between these, so you can maintain a perfectly non-destructive experience for all of your editing. I guess this is more like a dream catcher than a spider web. But as you can see, we have now only 1 layer because we've gone and merged them together. and it's still non-destructive. What's actually happening is you have your other layers, but they get merged together by the tools, all in that goal of making it so it's as user-friendly and basically as WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, as possible. And yeah, here we have the geometry of all those merged together, and I guess some kind of impression of a dream catcher. And then let's see, so that was that, but I should also show, yeah, we can now use G, R to rotate it, S to scale it, and then of course I can walk it along an axis. That's something I really, really wish that we had in the other vector editing software I've used, whether that be Inkscape or Illustrator. It makes it so much nicer, as I'm sure you are all very familiar with Blender. But yeah, okay, moving back to, we've just added 2 types of animation. I will show that in a second. I'm going to show one of these first. This one's actually quite simple. So we're just barely beginning to venture into the vector graphics, to the motion graphics world a little bit. I don't think we're really going to necessarily focus on that as our main thing. We want to continue making a really good, solid vector editor, and then also work towards raster as well. But that's what this is. And of course, I guess raster is more commonly used if you're working with Blender and you want to make your 2D assets like textures and things, but you might also be designing something that looks like a UI. And you might have, if you're making like a sci-fi HUD for an animation you're using in Blender, this could be a very good way specifically to create those kinds of assets and export them frame by frame. So this is actually just a procedural animation, very simple actually what's going on. We just have a number, and this number is, I think, that number is just the number of radians in a circle. But then we have animation time, and the animation time is simply driving the sine wave animation, and we just rotate each one of these by a different angle. So it just creates something very basic like that. And of course we can pause it and restart it. But what's even more neat is we can actually do not just animation based upon the frame number you're on, but we can actually animate based upon the current time. So this is live based upon the current time, if you look at a clock. And what this is doing is it's taking the real time, and we're using the number of seconds, but we could also change it to like the number of minutes. But we have to do it twice because we're using it here and here. Wait, no, that's millisecond. Sorry, I haven't looked at this one in a few days, but we'll stick with the demo for real time. And basically, if we look at a real clock, it will change to that, and we can even do the reflection. And what's even a little bit crazier, and by the way, just to mention, the algorithm that we're using for morphing between shapes does not really handle the topology very well, so that's why that's a little bit messed up. But that's something that we'll be figuring out a better algorithm for. But what's even crazier is you can actually start modifying these shapes, and then based upon the indices of those points, they will update live, and you can keep selecting things and moving them. So that's a little bit funky, but definitely kind of cool. And if I want the shadow to do it as well, because the tool was modifying those points, what it does is it generates a node that modifies points. But if I just take that and put it here, now it applies to the shadow as well. So yeah, and then you can always go non-destructively hide and show it. So what I'm doing is just enabling and disabling that node that produces this modification to that geometry. So yeah, that kind of covers a little bit of the real-time animation, which is a fun little experiment that we've been playing with recently. We also have, oh yeah, here's kind of a cool one. So if you actually open the editor on your own time, if you come visit the website, we have some built-in demo artwork. Also, I see Francesco's here. He was actually the person who recommended adding demo artwork. So thank you to him for suggesting that, because it's actually been a really good way for people to get introduced to the editor. And so we actually have it animating here, just also based upon the current time, number of seconds since we started the animation. And of course, you can pause it or restart it. And all that really does is it just takes the existing demo, and this was the existing demo, is that you can just move these around, and that's something that would be really, really painful to do. Like geometry nodes, of course, in Blender is very much built for this kind of workflow, but what's not built for this kind of workflow is a traditional vector editor. So if you're, let's say you're working on, I mentioned earlier, if you're making an animation in Blender that also then has a sci-fi HUD that you need to make in a 2D tool, you'll have a really hard time kind of animating like things moving along paths and other kinds of things that really require more of a way of describing sort of how it gets generated over time as you vary the time parameter. And that's really just not what Illustrator or Inkscape or any of the static vector graphics tools are designed for. But this sort of comes as a natural consequence. Like we added this with minimal effort, actually, because now you just hit play, and all it really does is it moves the distance along. And that really didn't take much time to build once we had the necessary infrastructure for animation. I'll close that one for now. And so actually, there are a number of things that are really cool about how you can animate, how you can do even just static images a little bit more based upon the procedural approach compared to doing everything by hand. So here we have a bunch of grapes, and it would be pretty painful to just decide like what color do I want all 50 grapes to look like so they look sufficiently random. And all we have here is we have like this layer of top grapes, and we have the middle grapes, and we have the background grapes, and those are each a different color. And we can just pick colors based upon the assignment of colors. So this is just a node, and that node is just assigning colors. Again, very much inspired by the Blender geometry nodes approach to have like a color ramp where it applies different colors based upon the randomization. So now you can choose whatever fits your color scheme really nicely, and then go add the next layer and choose more colors. And as far as I know, there's really no vector graphics editors in the world that have ever gone this approach of having a totally non-destructive approach that also allows you to procedurally modify pieces of the data, like pieces of what you're working on in a more data-oriented direction that gives you this control. So yeah, I have sort of just recolored that based upon a few different layers and those gradients. And of course, if I wanted to get funky, I could always add another gradient stop here and make it like yellow. And now I've got some very discolored grapes that I would not want to eat. Or maybe it's just some kind of exotic variety. Okay, here is a quick demo of how we're actually getting a little bit more into raster. And this is something that's going to be really unique coming up in the future. And this is just a small demo of it. So the performance is going to be really bad right now because we are running entirely on the CPU. And this noise generation has a bunch of octaves, which makes it really slow. But I will nonetheless show you that even though this is mostly a vector editor, we also have a little bit of raster. But the really cool part is that it's what we call resolution agnostic raster. And that means that you're not set to a specific resolution of your document. Just like vector graphics, you can zoom in forever. We can also do the same thing here with how we're zooming in. And I think I reached the max zoom level here. It's like 1,000,000% zoom or something like that, just to avoid floating point imprecision. But at that point, I can always zoom out more. And the Mandelbrot is limited to this rectangular area, but of course we can always zoom out more, and we're seeing the noise generation. So what's actually happening here is we are creating the Mandelbrot and then simply mapping the colors with this gradient map. So pretty similar to the Blender color ramp node, where it just changes the grayscale value into a color of your choice. So now I can change the color scheme as I see fit. And then I have transparency here for the inner part where it goes black. Basically, it goes to transparent. And that's how we can see this noise pattern behind like that. So the idea here is, of course, a fractal is a little bit more of a tech demo than you're likely to need in most cases. But we're going to eventually have the ability to type in like the actual equation of the fractal you're rendering. And that might be useful if you're rendering like a YouTube video that's talking about how, like a math video on YouTube exploring the math behind fractals. You could render all the frames for that. And then a few other examples. This is like a nice way of procedurally generating a lot of this stuff. So what we're really doing here, I'll just explain the thought process. We scatter a bunch of points inside the circle, and these all just become points of different sizes because we can actually change what the sizing parameters are. So we're going between a minimum scale of 0.6 and a maximum scale of 1.2. And I can kind of change these. And then I can also say we want more of the big ones or more of the small ones. So that's a really nice way to not have to go place those by hand and attempt to make it look like it mimics randomness when it really doesn't. And then here is just a simple radial repeat, but we also then go and jitter all the points, so that makes it even more randomized, and you don't have to go spend a bunch of time manually making it look like it's like it is fitting. And then here we're just kind of radially moving these along. And in fact, even this jitter shape here, this is based upon a jitter. So if I actually go and change the seed, now we have a different version of this every frame. But I guess it is below. In that case, it extends too far below. So the Boolean operation that's cutting out one or the other is extending below. So that's would have to just be moved up. But basically, yeah, as we can see, we can move the seed around and just have totally different versions of each of these. And same for this one, we can move the seed and have different versions. So I guess pretty similar to the case of putting your sprinkles on your donut when you're doing your first Blender Guru tutorial. You can change the sprinkles so that they don't overlap with each other, or find something that looks aesthetically pleasing. So yeah, that's
Keavon?
kind of a good way. Yeah.
Keavon, you open to questions throughout the presentation, or?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions if you can, as long as I can hear them through the microphone.
Yep.
Yeah, the vertical lines there, can that be driven by audio?
That is absolutely something we want to do. Yes. I mean, at the moment it can't, but that is specifically a use case we have on probably like the 1 year time horizon, mostly because it would just be really fun, and I'm looking forward to adding that because it would be really cool. But yes, the idea is that just like we saw with the real-time clock here, the idea is that we have live data that can generate whatever you need every single frame.
Yeah, we have another question.
Mm-hmm. Go for it.
Is there proportional editing of the vertices? Was the question.
At the moment, we do not have that feature, but that is, yeah, definitely something like we're going to directly steal that feature from how Blender represents it by putting a little drop down up here and having the O key support, the O key would toggle that, and you can change the different fall offs and things.
Anybody in the room play with Graphite so far? Graphite. Yeah, we have at least one Graphite user in the room.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay, sorry. Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
So we are running a little bit behind schedule. Is there more that you wanted to show?
I think that pretty much covers it. I was sort of going to the point of just showing off little things here and there, but yeah, I think
Sure.
we're pretty good.
Okay. Any other questions for Keavon? Thanks, Keavon. Any other questions for Keavon? No? Awesome. Well, Keavon, I want to thank you so much for presenting to our group.
Yeah, definitely.
And good luck with the tool development. It looks exciting.
And yeah, everyone basically just join the community, and if you like procedural design as you do in Blender, then kind of we're trying to make the 2D equivalent for that.
Yeah, there's a Discord group if you want to hear about new releases or updates or things like that, which is how I got tuned into it. Well, thanks, Keavon. Yeah, I appreciate it. You have a great rest of your day and enjoy Northern California.
Yeah, sorry I couldn't come in person, but would have been fun.
No worries. Okay.
There you go. It's working.
Awesome.
So my name is Robert Crosby. Currently, I'm working on a project that involves a panorama app that allows you to take multiple pictures around yourself and takes multiple pictures in brackets and be able to. And I've been using machine learning of Blender to combine everything into HDR images and such, but unfortunately not really able to show much of that project right now because of technical difficulties. But as a side project, I've been looking into a 3D model generation, and one of the more interesting things that come out last December was this Microsoft Trellis project. And this is out as a by the MIT license, so you're allowed to. So it's available on multiple sites like Hugging Face and various other outlets, and also you can also download the models and actually run it on your own machine if you have a strong enough machine to be able to do that. So I managed to get it working with what's called a Comfy UI. Has anybody played around with that? So this is their GitHub, GitHub thing there. Let's see if bring up that, and so I can zoom into that.
Maybe it's been Comfy UI.
Anyway, so this is not Blender. This is Comfy UI. It's kind of a node-based way of doing of running AI generation and control nets and such. And you have some very complex control nets and stuff. But with this, some new tools that come out with this IF Trellis is kind of a new project that came out that along with Trellis to bring in Trellis as into Comfy UI. Kind of make it as an easier way of generating 3D models. And basically what's doing here is what you do is you add in a 2D image. So this little figure here is just a 2D image that was generated using stable diffusion and such. And you run it through the model. You have several different options, with quality textures and such, amount of steps it takes. If you've ever dealt with a diffusion model, it's very similar. It's a lot of how many steps you take, and it depends. It affects the quality of the model. And there's also a couple extra things like it also decimates the model too, so it's not super dense. And then and you have a little viewer here where you actually see what the result is. And then so at this point you actually have a 3D model that you actually import into Blender. And I got a couple of them on here, but I'm not going to try to open it. So you get these glib models, which are kind of combined mesh and texture models. And it's kind of a different format. I've already only seen it with this. Then I can see if we try to put one of these figures. That's the point of the presentation, to see if it actually opens up a file here.
Might take a little while.
Yeah, it shouldn't be too big. But you get these 3D models. So what Trellis tries to do is it tries to figure out what's behind the model and such. So it kind of generates all the geometry and such, and then also the textures. Oh, here we go. Sweet. So this is using like a little figure model where let's give it a little time there. But yeah, you see you move around the back here and stuff. This is all stuff that's not actually seen in the picture. Although you kind of disjointed there in a couple spots, but yeah, it's able to just take a 2D image and then just create a 3D mesh out of it. And it's something that's very massive tool that available to anybody who's dealing with 3D graphics and such. And yeah, it's available for free. You can run it on your own machine, and potentially maybe somebody may be able to get this running within Blender. If the work I've been doing, I've been working with TensorFlow on Blender. I'm able to install it on the Python interpreter on Blender and be able to run training and all that stuff and be able to run models through that. And so Blender is actually a very good platform for this kind of stuff. So yes.
Curious of what that line pretty looks like.
Oh yeah, of course. So here's what it looks like in solid view. And then if I just go to so it's not too dense. Where this
It's the density of the methods. Number of polygons configurable to the company UI.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a decimate option within that. I'm not going to try to bring it back up again. There was an option to specify the amount of decimation, but for some reason the company UI version only allows you to do like down to 90% if you want a very dense model, and all the way up to 1 for whatever reason it lets you do it, but it's nothing. Yes.
Is anybody else in the room using the AI mesh generation tool?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Which ones are your favorites?
Exercise, body measures, what definitely ones.
There's one that I was using that was like a plugin for Blender
Oh yeah.
to figure out the name. Like all you do is like.
And you guys have like, what tool are you using? The AI mesh generation tool. Sorry.
There's an online one called Meshy. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Okay.
I played around with Blackflip as well. Did anybody play with that one? That was around December or so, but it wasn't as good as this one. There's give and take a lot of pros and cons of all these different ones. Particularly with Trellis is the textures it generates. So that's not really as apparent in this model, but it does a lot of shading and stuff. And some models it's like total black textures, which is not really cool, or not.
You pull the texture of this.
Oh yeah. Here we go. Yeah, yeah, very much. I think they actually do use kind of a photogrammetry process in creation, and then use a different process of projecting the images and such. Also, they've also a couple of days ago they actually released a text-based version of their models, so you don't have to provide a 2D image. You just put in a description of whatever it is. If I want to say it's very crude right now, but you know it's all stuff that's still coming out, and it's only been out for a couple of months. And you know, as I was saying, there's a lot of different options available right now, but this one's available for free and it's available under the MIT license. Yeah, it's pretty much open source. And yes,
Yeah, so you said this is available right away.
yes.
So in terms of like training steps and like time taken to generate such models, what's the quality improvement that you see, like, when you do, let's say, a short training amount of time and versus like a very long? Do you see like a massive gain in quality, or is this like consistent between short and long training steps?
Kind of hard to say. You kind of have to play around with things. It's not really training. It's more I would say it's more steps in the model. When you're talking about training, you're actually training, you know, actually putting in information into the model. Oh, no worries. But yeah, I've noticed a few, you know, really cranked up the amount of steps for the prediction, I believe. You kind of get some really weird effects sometimes. You know, sometimes you get like very like disjointed blobs and stuff, or it's, you know, usually it's at the very extremes where I see that, and then a lot of times I just don't see much of a difference at all. So it's
Are there temperature settings involved for creativity?
the temperature what?
Temperature settings for the creativity, like, or is it going to do exactly?
So it goes off of a C value. So you change the C value and it actually changes proportions of models and such. There isn't really I know if Stable Diffusion, there's that one value you can set for how close you want it to be to the
Temperature.
yeah. They don't really have that on that. It's just more just a random value. So I don't know if they.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah.
Can a model like this that's generated, it's triangulated, can it be trained to then generate the mesh with quads and subdivision surfaces and also topology for support deformation?
Not that I know of. I've heard of Meshatron. Has anybody dealt with that? I think NVIDIA's been working on some stuff with that where they'll be able to do pretty much retopology by using their machine learning and such. I haven't really looked into that yet, but you know, something like this, you're pretty much going to get, you know, a lot of triangles because it's all doing some kind of photogrammetry kind of stuff.
And can these generators take, let's say, an action pose like this guy's,
Yeah.
but then generate a T pose or an A pose and separate the props?
That's probably something more complex. But yeah, I have. So this guy was I did see if I can open up another one here. Test my luck on here. So I think this figure might be a different one.
This is the worst that AI next generation will let.
Yeah. So like next week, this is the worst it looks today. Next week and tomorrow it's going to be.
So this has been kind of a side project I've been working on. And, you know, it's kind of just joint from Blender. So I kind of apologize for that. But I've been doing a lot of work with TensorFlow within Blender, and it can be very possible to bring the stuff, you know, run the stuff directly inside Blender. You know, rather than having to go through, rather having to go through Comfy UI or some other kind of web portal. So it's kind of almost like not really an A pose, but more of a natural pose, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, you could just give it a picture that's I've had the picture available. I think I have yeah. That's the picture that that used the pull in any kind of picture from anywhere.
Oh, okay.
So actually, I wonder if I might be able to open this one. Under bear. Can't remember if this is the one or not. So I've actually pulled some images offline and tried running the. Might not be a good. Yeah.
I was just wondering, if you like had an idea for something you could say, like, I wanted a character, but I wanted it in an A pose or a T pose.
Yeah,
So
so that'll be something with the text model that they just put out. So I haven't really had time to really play with it because it's only been out. It's only been out a couple days. This wasn't the. I think it was a better reference. We're actually
But how good GPT-4o is now.
Oh yeah.
You could put all of that in GPT-4, have it generate the image through here. The other interesting that I noticed with the new 4o is that I asked it to show me a model. Turn this into a 3D model and it's showing you a topology overlay. Wow. I'll be damned, they didn't do a pretty damn good representation of the topology. So if they can do it in imaging, hopefully it'll be getting closer to having that in the fields.
So anyway, so this is an image I just pulled offline, and I did multiple. So I did multiple generations using different seeds and stuff. So each of these. Oh, give it a second. Yeah, there we go.
Are these driving off of a single image or can you feed?
Yeah, it's all being driven off this image
Can you
here.
feed it multiple images?
Oh, yeah.
Say ask 4o for a turntable.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can actually provide it multiple images from different angles, and it'll actually try to create the mesh from that. I've had some success with that. Depends on what you're pushing it. If something doesn't make any sense and stuff, you might get something interesting. So it's definitely some really interesting stuff that's coming out there, and yeah, I guess that's.
And it's always trying to give her topology.
Well, like so Mesotron, they're NVIDIA's trying to work on some tools for taking everything into quads as well. So I'm sure there's some stuff out there that's doing quads, knowing how fast things are going with this stuff. But this is available for free, and if you have a strong enough machine to run it yourself, you can run it locally. Right.
And just be sure to share desktop. We've got a mic here.
Oh.
Just share whole screen.
And I guess let's do that. I don't want to
Awesome.
slideshow. Stop
go.
Wait, where's the actual microphone? Do I need to like?
So mic is here. So as long as you talk in this journal, you're good.
Okay, everyone. Hi, my name is Hugo. I guess my biggest claim to fame within the Blender community is that I run the Blender subreddit.
That's huge.
I basically got to that position by answering a lot of beginner questions, and there is one question that I see pop up every now and then, but I don't see necessarily a whole lot of solutions to that I would personally consider to be satisfying, and that is how to actually combine different normal maps together. For most textures, there's pretty straightforward ways. I mean, there's like a dedicated mix color node, and it has various modes. There's like a mix node, and that's applicable for a lot of things like metalness, roughness. Math node set to mix and min and max is very useful for those single channel textures as well. But there really isn't like a specific node for normal maps, and there's no real obvious way to do that. I mean, you can use, I guess, a mix vector node, but you have to question yourself, like, is that even valid? I mean, you're not taking into consideration any of the actual math behind normal mapping, are you? So speaking of that math, let's just do some basics. We have in most image formats, we have normalized color channels. You know, your typical PNG where you have something like 0 to 55 if it's 8-bit, or 0 to 65,535 if it's 16-bit. You can divide by the maximum representable value, and that gets you a normalized value in the range of 0 to 1. However, if you're thinking about a normal vector, which has a unit length, its individual XYZ components are going to be ranging from -1 to +1. This creates a need to do some remapping if you're going to store those normals within image textures. The encoding formula is right here, very straightforwardly. It's basically just a simple linear remapping. You could do something fairly equivalent with like a map range node. If you have an intuition behind that, you have an intuition behind what motivated this specific intuition, this formula. In order for normal map to be valid, the normal vectors should have a z component, which is, I guess the blue component should have a greater value, which is like greater than 1/2, because this means that the z component of the normal vector is positive, essentially pointing outwards from the surface that is being shaded. Anything less than that would otherwise be facing into the object, and that is, of course, problematic. And normal vectors should theoretically have a length of 1. In practice, Blender normalizes their length before you pass them, or after you pass them into the shader, so it's really not that big of a deal. But I guess this is an issue that I have to some extent tackled from a broader context, or I guess I was thinking of more general applicability. So it is something to consider there. So I guess some solutions I've seen suggested, a mixed color node set to like overlay, or I think it's like linear blend. I've seen some other things, but it's not really based on any relevant math. People just kind of suggest it. A mixed color node on a normal map. I guess this is something that I just mentioned earlier. It's not really clear if this is like a good solution. It's not inherently based on any of the math behind normal mapping. I've seen people like who I guess are a bit smarter say, oh, well, you can decode the normal map and then use like a mixed vector node. That's algebraical equivalent to just not doing the decoding, because like basic algebra, if you just simplify it. And again, if you just use a mixed vector on the actual normal vectors, like if you run the normal map through the normal map nodes and then do the mix, it's still the same result. I am, wait, hold on. Let's see, do I? If you're doing a linear interpolation between just the normal vectors, whether they're encoded or not, it's actually like not a terrible solution, but there is a minor, what I would consider to be a minor annoyance, which is kind of illustrated here. The blue and the red dots, you can consider those to be like the ends of normal vectors. And the green one that is sort of ping-ponging between them is just what you get if you directly interpolate their positions. The black one, which is swinging around, is what you get once you normalize the length of that vector. And as you can see, the speed is very inconsistent. I think this is a sufficient enough drawback to warrant looking for a better solution. Although in practice, I suppose that unless you're doing some sort of like blending between different materials, honestly, just using a mixed node is probably going to be good enough for you. Kind of defeats the purpose of everything I'm saying here, but you know. Okay, so if I suppose the question that I want to ask now is, or I want all of you to ask yourselves is, how would I like it to behave when I combine different normal maps together? Because once we have that intuition, we can sort of develop some formulas that exhibit that intuition. Like, let's just say something like, I have a normal map that does nothing, and I combine it with a normal map that does nothing. I think most people will intuitively understand, yeah, that should just produce a normal map that also does nothing. What if I take a normal map and then I combine it with its negated self, like the opposite? That seems like it should cancel out. Now, I think there's here a more interesting question, which is I take some normal map that has some features, I combine it with an empty one. What should happen? And I think you might have two different intuitions here. The first is, well, it should just spit out the first normal map. Essentially, I suppose you could think of this. I mean, if you're thinking about, or if your intuition is telling you that, I think it's probably because you're thinking in terms of how much of an impact the normal map is having on the actual shading. However, you can also be, you might intuit and say something like, well, what if they're kind of getting like averaged together, then like it should be a watered down version of the original normal map that has actual features. And what if I just combine the normal map with itself? Maybe it should be a normal map that is in some sense twice as strong, or maybe it should just be the same normal map, kind of in the same way of, if I average, the number 4 and 4, well, I get 4. And I guess I've already spoiled this, but the intuitions that I've been hinting towards are just these intuitions of addition and, oh wait, that should be end, oh my God. I know math, trust me, I promise I promise I graduated the first grade. Wait, hold on. That one's also wrong. Hold on. Okay. I guess that's, I don't know, when do they teach you averages? I guess that's more like late elementary school. But the point is that the intuitions that I was trying to hint at are fundamentally just the intuitions that we have from the operations of addition and of averaging. So how do we actually get something that behaves like that? And generally speaking, the simplest way to get something that behaves like addition or averaging is just to actually use addition and averaging. But if you were to directly apply this to normal maps or to normal vectors, this does not maintain their validity. Since we're fundamentally talking about these I guess, these things that are tilted, the concept of a slope of a line seems, I think, intuitively related. The whole thing from middle school, y equals mx plus b, I guess, in that formula. But there's a bit of a problem here in the sense that if you try to take the slope of a normal vector of 0, 0, 1, which is like the normal vector that does nothing, I guess, in tangent space, you get a 1 over 0, and that's undefined. That seems problematic mathematically. But if you just take the reciprocal of slope, because the z component should be strictly positive, then we never get division by 0. So hey, that's a solution there. And we can easily compute it just by dividing the actual vector by z, which is actually a really common thing in the world of computer graphics, which maybe this is not intuitively obvious if you haven't really gotten into the math, but this is actually just mathematically equivalent to projecting the normal vector onto the plane z equals 1 in tangent space. This effectively allows us to turn these normal vectors into just these two-dimensional vectors in a flat 2D plane. And once we have these two 2D vectors on this flat plane, well, we can add and average them very straightforwardly, just in a component-wise fashion. In fact, there's basically any operation that you can do on 2D vectors, you can now do on these representations of normal vectors: subtraction, negation, multiplication by scalar, linear interpolation. In effect, we get like a very familiar, and I would argue artistically intuitive set of tools for manipulating normal maps that I think can be really useful. I will note that you do depending on what exactly your use case is, you may need to normalize the result of doing these operations to ensure that the normals vector is 1. So this is what that idea actually looks like. Basically, I have two normal maps, one that is, I guess, making it look kind of like a metal grate, and another one that kind of looks like it's a beat up surface. And I'm just adding them together using this approach. So you can see wait, hold on, is that? That's okay. Okay, these are animated GIFs on my end. That is okay. Wait, oh. Yeah, okay.
Should they be going faster?
Yes, they're changing every 1.5 seconds. So I mean, God damn it. Like, if you want to come up and take a look after this, but the results are, in my opinion, more or less what you would intuitively expect to happen if you were to combine two normal maps just by adding them. And I think that makes them I think this makes for a very powerful system for manipulating normal maps. I'd also like to point out that there's a mathematical formula called SLURP, which is a spherical linear interpolation, which is rather applicable to this. Basically, what it does is that that early demonstration where I had the graphing calculator and the black point was moving very quickly. This is basically a corrective factor to that. Or this is basically what you get. This formula SLURP is what you get when you apply a corrective factor to that, so that the speed is actually constant. I think this might lead to more appealing results under certain circumstances. That being said, this does still have the issue that if you set the factor to like outside of 0 to 1, you might get like the normal below the surface, and that's problematic. If you want to download a blend file with some node setups doing all the things, I think I did like addition, subtraction, negation, scaling by a vector, or scaling by a scalar, and linear interpolation. They're at the following link. It's a Google Drive link. Yeah, just warning, if you click on that, it'll start a download. That's it.
Awesome. Okay, so we're at that part of the meeting where we want to hear about your projects. So if anybody has any projects they're using Blender for, raise your hand now. Is there anybody want to talk about the stuff they're working on? Shy group for that. Joe, do you have any projects? Yeah?
I can show some older stuff. Maybe
Sure.
from here. Okay.
Yeah, let's do a warm up. Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Let me get you back. Need a web browser?
I don't have any. I didn't bring. Yeah, I guess I could use the web browser unless you had my presentation the last time still saved somehow.
Oh my gosh, that would be.
I'll just show I'll just show a quick project.
Okay. Here, let me get you back to the web browser then. There we go. It's all yours. Take it away.
Let's go to YouTube.
So why don't you introduce yourself, what you do?
Oh, hi, yeah, I'm Joe Conover. I do 3D. I'm a 3D artist. I do visual effects, motion graphics, and I've been here in LA. Been here in LA since 2016, and I joined this group back in 2016 because it was the only Blender group, and so it's been here since then. It's been pretty cool. Yeah. So I haven't done too much stuff lately. But I can show a couple of like the older projects that I've done a couple years ago. Let's see. So I actually did this 5 years ago, but I could show this one first. This was one of the concepts I did I was working for Warner Brothers like 5 years ago when they were making Dune Part 1, and so this is one of like the little concept ones that I built, modeling, texturing everything in Blender, and motion graphics and After Effects. Just a quick short animation. That was like a pitch for Warner Brothers. It never went anywhere, unfortunately, but it was a cool thing that I made. And then last year, I was working on this short film. There might be some obscenity, so it's like R-rated a little bit, so like close your eyes if you're sensitive to that stuff. Is there a way to open up a new tab here?
Yeah, they're on the left.
On the left? Oh, this thing, okay. Do I click the plus button? Oh wait, no. Right there. Cool. Gotcha. So I was working for this movie director named Harmony Korine. He made this movie back in like 2013 called Spring Breakers. Yeah, it was like a bunch of James Franco and a bunch of Selena Gomez. It was an old movie. But I was working with him. He does a lot of music videos and stuff, and he wanted to do this. He had this idea where he wanted to, like video games make a lot more money than film these days. So we wanted to do like this mix of like we wanted to make these like short films that were like video game style or something. That was kind of like, and I told him there's this old game called Burnout Paradise that I really like, and I told him I wanted to be like Burnout Paradise, car like street racing type of stuff, because he's based in Miami where there's a lot of these like street takeovers and things like that. And so it started off with that idea, this whole street racing thing, and then it kind of morphed. He had this other idea of having like some leprechauns fight some Yakuza people or something. It was like a really weird idea, and then they were just like, you know what, combine these two together to make this animation. So I did this like modeling layout, and then I started this like street racing animation in Blender. And then I kind of had to like retrofit it, like make the cars more like Leprechaun fighting a Yakuza or something like that. And then like replace the character with like a Leprechaun lady and like a Yakuza dude or something. But I came up with this thing. Here, check it out. See if you can handle 1440. I don't know. Yeah. Pretty hype.
Should have played this tune like Patrick said.
Yeah, I know, right? That was a few days. I just missed it. Yeah. So I bet, yeah. So that was my little short film a couple years ago. Thank you. I wanted to do kind of like the Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse art style, which I really liked. But like make it do like a little bit slightly different or whatever, like have these like layers mixing together and all this stuff. I feel like I succeeded. I was pretty happy with that. There was this movie that I watched from the 1930s called Nightmare Alley, where they have a bunch of like all of the noise is in the highlights or something, and then all of the legit geometry is in the darkness. And so I did like a thing where I did all this like noisy stuff in like the highlighted areas, and then like I don't know, there's a lot of like funny stuff I did with like my layers, but I was really happy with like how it turned out. Every frame looked pretty cool and stuff like that. And so this was the pitch that I gave to Harmony, and he made this music video there's this artist called Young Lean. He's like a rapper. I don't know. It's a strange. He made this he took the whole Leprechaun versus Yakuza thing, and he made this like really wacky music video with that short film that I just made. Here, check it out. And this was in Miami. I did like some extra footage too. It's crazy. You can see like there's a leprechaun and there's a Yakuza dude, I guess.
consider even one Japanese mobster.
This black dude, he's the Yakuza guy. I don't know. They're hiring actors from Miami, so he hires whoever he wants. Yeah. This guy's a world-renowned film director, so I'm not gonna question his choices. I like it.
Think you go work at the Blender Foundation?
I don't know. That would be a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just keep going. Yeah, but there was a New York Times article about this, and there were like several big publishings about it. So I was pretty happy with that. Yeah, I was like, hey, I'm in the New York Times. Yeah, that's my. Here, let me close all these tabs. That's my stuff. Thank you.
All right. Does anybody else have any? Like Mexican luchador wrestling versus elephant tamer. Yeah, that stuff. It's a tough act to follow, really. Does anybody else have any Blender related projects they want to share? Anything you're working on? Sure. Yeah, come on up. Absolutely.
Yeah, I showed something like a couple of meetups ago, and this is what I kind of finished it, but I haven't got to do sound design yet, so.
Anybody working on any cool projects using Blender that they can't share because they're under NDA? Yeah. Awesome. Is there any like broad brush strokes you can share about like what you've done? Not so much? Okay.
Probably moving to a permanent picture.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Blender sneaks in, a lot of feature films and like very sometimes game development. I can see a lot of Blender use in like AAA games, like Pool of Artists and they're using it back in I told them I had to. Awesome. Any other announcements or information that you guys want to share about conferences, books, tools, tutorials?
When we go off the stream, I can show a little bit of the outdoor. But like something I'd rather show offline. Sure. So there is no problem to not spoil it.
Oh, good.
Nice. So this is when the geometry no hair came out, I was pretty excited, and but it was only able to move with the surface, and then so I want to add like physics to it, but it was based on 4.1, and I heard like there are physics in hair coming out in the new version, but I haven't tried it out yet. So this is what I finished. Yeah, the changing hairstyle is one of the reason I want to give myself to doing physics in geometry hair. Yeah.
So how's the simple is within Blender? How did you add the physics to it?
So I run my own geometry in C++ and compile my own version. So yeah, this is kind of the guide curve and then interpolated. And so I have a red shape and then a simulated version. And based on the guide curve, it interpolates. Yeah.
You have your geometry not set up anymore online?
I will have the custom Blender 4.1 version hold online. Yeah, but you will need to compile it. So how do I close it?
Thanks for sharing.
I have a question that's I just keep running into.
Sure.
And I just feel like I can't find it, and I feel dumb. So, I'm an industrial designer, and so I design consumer products. And, most of my friends, or my contemporaries, are like, God, you're crazy for trying to use Blender and Polygon stuff. But I enjoy it. I mean, there are things that drive me crazy about it, but there are things I enjoy about it as well. So anyways, I have to render things in multiple colors because people buy things often in multiple, or you want to offer things in multiple colors. And the closest thing I've ever found to this was Autodesk Showcase years ago had a sort of variance feature, and then there's variance in KeyShot, which I'm sort of morally opposed to. And so I was wondering, am I just missing that someone has written like a variant manager, I guess, for shaders and rendering orchestration in Blender? Or like that just doesn't exist? I need to find someone that I can like hire to make that.
What are you asking? What are you asking?
So like if I have like an object, or multiple objects, and I want to render them in with multiple sets of colors, textures, and lighting, let's say. How do I manage that other than with, I guess, multiple Blender files or having that same model in there 17 times with just different shaders applied to it? And coordinate that, like, okay, now render them all. Versus having to like wait for each one and manually.
Oh, render manager, Cube? No, but it's multiple. Like, I'm pretty sure that there are like add-ons that allow you to like use the typical thing that nowadays is resolved with add-ons. Because basically you need to have like, you collect your variants in your own data structure. So basically you just build your own user interface that keeps track of those variants, and then you can just quickly toggle between one another. So you can instance multiple copies of the same object so you can see them side by side, because there are all those use cases in industrial design that you don't just want to have variants, but you want to show them selectively, you want to render them, batch render them, all those things. Right. So I think this, in my experience, like if you go on the Blender YouTube channel and you search for Blender conference videos, you definitely find, if you search like for industrial design topics, you definitely find people that have dealt with this specific issue of building things for e-commerce and stuff like that. Right. That being said, as part, like as an early stage of the online asset browser project I was mentioning earlier, when I was talking about like plans for the future, we run into the topic yet again, because Blender natively doesn't have variants, that's true. And, it should. It should definitely have support for variants. It's an architectural change to some of the more core kind of data structures of Blender, so that's not something that can be easily done. But the topic came up once again when looking at those, at the topic, because say if you want to have an asset library and you want to have a shader that is red and blue, it's the same shader, you're just changing a couple of parameters. So how do you expose it? And of course you can work around it, but truthfully, you are literally saying this is the shader, it comes in, this is variant. Or you have a texture. The texture is a little bit more tricky because you have variants and also representations like high and low res, but also you have red and blue, but it's the same thing. So we're very aware that that is like something that would really improve a lot of use cases, not just for industrial design. It's like a little bit of a shortcoming of how Blender works today, but it's definitely something that is,
What was that presentation down at the Blender conference where there was a bunch of variants of doors and
yeah, that's
Sebastian Koenig.
That's probably an example, like the door, the multiverse of doors or something.
Yeah.
I don't think it's name.
Nah. Gosh, if I could type, that is. Koenig. I don't even know how to spell his name.
Frame, each frame is small to chase render. That's asked of that problem. That color. Right. You got to get it all done. It's 15 renderings.
Yeah, I thought about animation, and then part of my brain that sucks at coding and things that happen over again starts to get on fire. My eyes cross. So I tried, and then like I think I put it
Would rendering at grayscale and then changing it in comp via pipeline?
I suppose so. But I do not, but I think I know what you mean.
But that's the talk. That's the one that you should watch probably.
If for no other reason than the talk is hilarious. He's got a really good sense of humor, and he took this project and he had to literally render like thousands of product visualizations, which turned into like hundreds of thousands, and eventually they just had to approach it programmatically. So, anyways, yeah, it's really worth watching. Great question though. Yeah, any other questions or items that you guys want to cover?
The guy who hasn't played with Blender yet.
Yeah.
Where do we start? That's not a donut.
That's not it. You know, that's where everybody's head went
Yeah,
immediately.
I know.
Was so my recommendation is CG Cookie has a beginner blender. Has a beginner blender series that's free, and will take you through kind of the basics of learning the interface, going through the different sets of functionality. It's relatively short. It's really professionally made. These guys make fantastic learning content. So I would start there. I would do the beginner blender series. Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think it's Blender Basics. It's right at the top. There you go. And looks like it's updated to 4.x, which is great because Blender moves really fast. And these poor guys have to update their content all the time. But yeah, gives you an intro into 3D space, editing objects, all that kind of stuff. And by the end of that, you should be able to create most things.
Thank you.
Yeah, question in that.
This was kind of working off your game, but we need either additional help from someone that knows like further in depth into Blender, or requesting specific functionality or tools be built in. Is there like a way to like get in contact or start working directly with Blender Foundation from like a business perspective?
I think that we've been trying for like, this is obviously a topic that comes up quite a bit, and starting from like a small shop of like, hey, we are trying, we have a big project, we like some serious NDA, we want to do something awesome, and we already use Blender and we want to go beyond what we can to we are a 100,000 people corporation that is having to Blender. The scale of those problems also needs to be approached in a different way. And in the light of that, what we've been trying to do is to try and leave it as much as possible to the market itself. And there have been like a couple of initiatives around this, like most notably, I want to give a shout out to Orange Combine, which is also part of the Outcroft project, which are the guys who organized a couple of years ago. And they do exactly this. So consulting and application of those solutions for Blender integration production pipelines. They do, of course, also risk of running into the same challenges because of different types of businesses. Like if you have to work with a Europe-based automotive company, it's going to be more challenging for them because they work with a LA.Based animation studio. It's like, but we do believe that by having initiatives like this, you can really achieve a broader adoption, but it really hinges on people feeling that confidence and having the entrepreneurial mindset to actually go out and offer those services. So the answer is, I think that is probably currently the most prominent one, and I think you should definitely reach out to them. They have a lot of expertise. When it comes to connecting with Blender, the Blender projects, more than Blender Foundation, like the investment of having some people in the team to be empowered to reach out in public. I know that it's a bit of a hassle because you have to hide some things that you are having in the NDA, but then you have the benefit of talking directly to the person. So that's like a thing that you have, like a little equation that you have to solve yourself internally and be like, is it worth it that I spend time talking to the Blender folks to say, hey, we have this, issue. And like, I cannot show you exactly the file, but this is something close enough. So it means you have to spend time creating that. But that builds amazing results. So I also recommend trying, it depends a bit on, how late you are, which is very. So like, it depends a little bit on those things, but I do that, and I do want to kind of bring that up as well, because that's also a very good way to get out and find solutions. Thank you.
Awesome. Good answer. Good question. Anything else? Any other questions in the group? Sure.
Yeah, so I had a seeding idea a little while ago, and I'm starting to dive into it a little bit. How many of you have ever looked at versus just doing a search, looked at the Blender documentation? Like, so gone in, like, started, and looked through, and then most people, I guess, kind of just do a search and see what comes up. And then how do you find the Blender documentation? Understandable, or?
I think for geometry nodes, it can be a little bit better explaining the specific mathematics of what's going on behind the scenes for people that are developers and trying to get very in-depth. But that's
like understanding the parameters a little bit more and what's going on behind each one. All right, cool.
Yeah, the docs are pretty good. And what you can't find out on the docs, if you go, if you go to that Blender community link that I was showing earlier, there's actually chats, so you can drop into and talk directly to the developers, real time, which is nice. Not all of them, but if you have a question, you could usually find the answer. I'll get out of this. Yeah, anything else from anyone else? We have about like 16, 17 minutes to meeting close, but we can close early if you guys want to head out. Go, what's that? Mingle, yeah, let's mingle. Okay, let's keep it social for the next 15 minutes. So.
If you stop the recording, I can show.
Oh gosh, I almost forgot.
That's fine.
Yeah. So online folks, really apologize about this, but we're gonna stop sharing and stop recording at this point because there's some NDA-ish kind of material.
Not NDA, it's just like people can see it. It's just the recording. That's the only thing that I'd rather not have it in the YouTube video. People can be in the call, like it's no problem.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording, and Francesco is gonna take us on a quick dog walk.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. All right, thanks. Can I plug in my computer?